From 1888 to 1913, the Russian Empire was seeing steady economic growth. While it was still way behind the rest of Europe, it was making progress in catching up. Through state and foreign investment, more industries were being set up. The railway network was expanded and agricultural production increased during this period. The empire was slowly enacting economic reforms, and while the government was still autocratic, you can argue that as more and more people entered the cities, unrest would grow and eventually greater political concessions would have had to be given for the Tsar to stay in power. As long as nothing significant happens, it seems like Russia will continue to industrialize and match the other great powers.
This needs to stop now. This is cancer. It's time to stop. It's time to stop, okay? No more.
So World War I happens, followed by the Russian Revolution in which Vladimir Lenin takes power, which results in a civil war but ends with the communists winning. The result of all this war and instability was the Russian economy collapsing, millions of people dying, and a famine which killed millions more. Russia was in a poor state, and Lenin believed that he knew the solution: communism.
Look, up in the sky, it's a bird!
It's a plane!
But Russia was still largely a rural country, with the majority of people living in the countryside, so he had to compromise with the new economic policy. Basically, this system allowed small businesses to operate while the government controls heavy industries. Farmers had more freedoms, like they could sell their surplus produce for a profit provided they pay a fixed tax. The idea was that this would help ease the transition towards communism. Lenin also launched an electrification plan in 1920 meant to build power plants including 10 hydroelectric plants across the country to help it modernize. These policies allowed the Soviet Union to rebuild itself, and by the time of Lenin's death, the economy had almost recovered to pre-World War I levels. However, all was not well politically. Lenin died in 1924 and was succeeded by Stalin. When Stalin came to power, the Soviet Union was on a steady path to recovery, but for him it was too slow. There was a fear that if the country does not industrialize and rebuild the army quickly, it might not be able to defend itself in the event of another war. Therefore, it was decided to focus the country almost exclusively towards building heavy industries and using it to remilitarize. In order to achieve this, Stalin abandoned the NEP method and replaced it with his 5-year plans. Making plans is easy, but who will be responsible for allocating resources and setting targets? Where will the technical experts come from, since the Soviet Union had little to none? And where were they gonna get the machines and technology which farms and factories will need to industrialize the country? The planning and target setting was done by a government planning committee called Gosplan. The experts and machines will have to be imported. But since foreign companies won't accept rubles or books about communism, they will have to export something valuable to gain foreign exchange. The only thing the country can give the world are resources like oil and agricultural products. Before World War I, Russia was a major grain exporter. It could do that again, but agricultural production hadn't returned to pre-World War I levels, and Stalin would need to raise productivity before taxing farmers more.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Yeah, Stalin doesn't care. He started collectivizing or nationalizing all farms. A particular group he targeted are the kulaks, who happened to be wealthy farmers who resisted collectivization. They were killed and sent to labor camps in the millions. Through this process, the government made farmers more dependent on it and used this dominance to increase taxes and force them to sell grain at low prices. The method of collective farming was also more inefficient, which combined with the high taxes that had to be paid before the farmers could retain any of their produce, caused massive famines in the Ukraine, the Volga region, and the North Caucasus. Now that Stalin can export these resources, he can hire foreign companies and experts to help build factories, infrastructure, and train locals. Foreign technology was used to build local versions of the same products, like tractors, which were mass-produced to use in farms to replace people moving to the cities. Because of collectivization, the government can also provide factory workers with a steady supply of food. And this is generally how the Soviet Union industrialized. They exported agricultural products and natural resources and imported machines, technology, and expertise. The government invested in heavy industries and used these factories to rebuild the army. Repeat this a couple of times and in 10 to 12 years the Soviet Union was an industrialized nation. The cost, however, was millions of people dying due to Stalin's policies. Because the Soviet Union almost exclusively focused on heavy industry, the country also had a shortage of consumer goods. The Soviet economic model also meant that factories were run inefficiently and the quality of goods was low. The Soviet Union would go on to win World War II, become a rival to the US during the Cold War, and eventually collapse in 1991 because of how inefficient this economic system was.